Evening. This is Carla from the Ministry for English Literacy, and I am here to speak to you guys. Well, actually, I'm here to speak with Neville, and we're going to be speaking about English literacy and the importance of English literacy. Neville Gaunt is an amazing individual. I am so excited to speak with him today. Having said that, I want to remind you that this show, like all of my shows, is sponsored by the Institute of Peace. Neville, can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, certainly. Carla, you've known me for a good couple of years now. And I suppose to a lot of people, I can be a big scary monster because I talk about entrepreneurship a lot, startups. I also talk about corporate, big business. But fundamentally, where I work today, having a long corporate life in the finance and oil and gas sector, today it's all about helping people be the best they can. And if you think of an athlete has always got a personal best, whether it's a high jumper or a long jumper or a long distance runner, a 1500 meter runner, Usain Bolt running 100 meters, the fastest man in the world. They've all got a personal best. The thing is, outside of that sort of athletic world, people haven't got a personal best because they don't know what it is. Sometimes they really achieve something and they think, blimey, that was lucky. Where the reality is they followed a process and it worked, but they don't really understand the process they were following. Like great salespeople, the really great salespeople follow a process and adapt it to who they're talking to. So it's nothing about them and it's everything about the people they're talking to. And that's how they become great salespeople. And we all need to be great salespeople because at the very least, if you're looking for a job, you have to sell yourself at interview. And at the very best, if you're in sales or you're an entrepreneur or you're running a company or you're a leader in an organization or a leader in a non-profit organization, you need to be able to communicate with other people and sell yourself, sell your story. So, bit of a longer interview than normal, not a long introduction than normal, Carla, but it's late in the evening and I suppose I've had a lot of practice today.
Well, let's talk a few moments about you. You're an amazing coach. I know that from personal experience and also seeing you on my Mindful show. What made you decide to coach people and help them grow as you do? You work with youth very often, and I'd like to know a little more about that. With youth very often.
Well, the interesting thing is, I call myself a coach because people can sort of understand it, but I also call myself a mentor when I'm talking in certain areas, and maybe a stretch of someone's imagination, a teacher. But I don't have any qualifications to do any of those apart from experience. And when it comes to coaching, I probably can take that all the way back to joining the Scouts at the tender age of about 5 or 6. My elder brother's 9 years older than me, and I'm number 2 in line. And he had at that time, they didn't have shirts, they had jumpers. So the Cub Scouts had jumpers, a bit like a sweatshirt, really, but it was made of wool. And can you imagine what an 11-year-old, rather large 11-year-old, giving his jumper to a rather small 5-year-old? And as I put it on, I felt a bit like Droopy because the arms were too long and the waist was sort of down by my ankles. But I wanted to be a scout. I wanted to join the Cub Scouts. And I suppose at that time, I was learning things that I'd never learned before. Now, today I know this as leadership, and I know it as coaching, and I know it as collaboration, and I know it as mentoring. But at 5-year-old, you know none of those things. And it's a question of your attitude towards the Scouts. And I stayed in the Scouts until I was about 27 years old, having spent 3 years away at university. So I went from Cub Scouts to Venture Scouts up to the age of 18. And you can go longer with Venture Scouts. But I went to university, and when I came back from university, they asked me to be a Scout Master. So I'd sort of turned from being an employee to being an employer, I suppose, if you want to put it in a slightly different language. So I became the Scout Master. It was up to me to put the lesson plans together every week and get the best out of young people. And, that's where it all started, I guess. And then I went into corporate life. And one thing I was good at was project management. So I used to get all the crap projects. No one wanted to touch them because they were all tainted with some form of tarred brush. But I managed to achieve them, and people wanted to work with me, to my surprise, because I was a bit grumpy, to say the least. But and you've seen a little of that side of me from time to time. But I worked in an industry that needed results. You couldn't. 24 hours meant several $1 million. So you literally had to make things happen. And I found out that I spent most of my time as a project manager. So I had a day job and I had a project management job. I spent most of my time as a project manager making sure everyone was happy. And it was a multidisciplinary teams typically, and they were all in different parts of the world. So we have lots of time zones to work with. And I just got used to it. You've heard me talk about it was a habit. And I happened to get quite good at a habit, as anyone can get good at a habit, but you can get good at a bad habit as well as good as a good habit. So does that explain it a bit more to you? I've probably never told that story to you.
I've never heard that story, honestly. And yet it's very interesting because I think of you as a top coach. I've watched you and I've had a chance to interact with you, and I love doing that because it makes my head. You get me thinking in ways I've never thought. Now, you and I are, I hate to say native English speakers, but we grew up speaking English. And it seems like a great part of the world speaks English.
Yeah, huge part of the world. It's the business language of the world. I mean, I'm not proud of that, being an Englishman, frankly, but it just is. And that probably goes back into, I don't know, 15th, 13th, 14th century, where a lot of piracy, I suppose, if you want to call it, started from the UK when we're a little island. So the only way we could move from our island was on a ship, and we would travel all the way around the world. And as you travel around the world, you leave your language, you leave your culture. If you're fortunate and smart enough, like Sir Walter Raleigh and Sir Francis Drake, they brought back culture to the UK. Potatoes, spices, linens, lace, and all that sort of, great stuff. So, we're a really little island, speaking English. It's quite small.
And yet, English has become the global language of the world. I'm just wondering what you would say when we talk about the Insan Party, which is Rehan Allahwala's party for humanity and bringing people not only together in Pakistan, but eventually the world. Why English literacy is so very, very important.
Well, let's take Pakistan, for instance. You get to year 11, which is O levels, or we call them GCSEs now in the UK. But that major milestone in a young person's life, if you like, it's the most formal exams you ever sit to start with when you're 16, 17 years old. And then you sit the higher. So in the States, you go to high school, and then you have a high school diploma, and then you go to undergraduate, and you go to grad school. So that 16 to 18 year arena is really important as a global leveling the playing field. And just, if anyone wants to look it up, there are PISA tables, PISA tables around the world as which countries are teaching the best, basically. And it's all done on results. But take Pakistan. English is not the first language. Urdu is their first language. But anyone taking the O levels and A levels and a degree course is taught in English. Nearly all the books are in English. The lessons are in English and their exams are in English. You've got to ask the question, why? And I think a lot of this is because all of the documentation, all of the books were originally drafted in English, and converting those into a different language that needs to be, so for instance, if you're doing chemistry, which is a very technical arena, coming up with a technical translation of some chemistry terms is not easy in any language. So hence, it always makes me smile when I talk to lots of senior people in Pakistan, and they'll do sort of, I call it Urd English, because they'll be speaking in Urdu for quite a bit of it, and then half of it will be English. And it's not just for my edification, it's actually the way their language has evolved. And it's easy for me, thankfully, being born in the UK, that I don't necessarily have to force myself to learn another language. I get by in several languages. I'm pretty good at listening, but speaking it, I do struggle with. It's trying to put the words together. And I think this is where people from Pakistan, let's say it, is they don't have a poor understanding of English. If truth be known, Carla, they have a better understanding of English than I do. Because they've had to be drilled. I didn't like English language, as we call it here, which is structure and form, and how to form a sentence, and pronouns and adjectives and an adverb. I mean, it used to bore me silly, frankly. I used to like the literature, Shakespeare, Tennyson. And I used to get very interested in that. But
even as a child?
Yeah, but particularly as a child. When I was introduced to it, I loved poetry as a kid. Dr. Seuss, Cat in the Hat type of arena. And I was so influenced by Dr. Seuss, along with one of my fellow directors, that we wrote a book called Mindfit Golf for Kids, and we've written it as though Dr. Seuss would have written it. So the stanza on the front says, the game of golf is really quite simple. It can all be explained by the size of a dimple. And it just goes on like that, really. So
really?
Yeah, so we have fun. We have a lot of fun doing, putting that out there. And I think, going back to what you're saying about there's a huge chunk of English speakers in the world. It's not that they don't understand English and they can't formulate a sentence. It's they're scared to say it. And that's why I call it an attitude to English, as opposed to the fact they can't they can't say things. They can say things. They're perfectly capable of saying it. Some of them have gone on and got a first, a distinction at their degree level because they're very good at writing English. But writing it to speaking it is almost like, a country mile away. And it's all down to attitude.
And even further than that, and I speak to Pakistanis all the time in English. But to get some of them to say hello, it could take an hour because they're afraid I cannot speak English. I cannot say this. And I'm not making fun of them, but it sounds like...
No, it's absolutely true. And it's that fear of being ridiculed. And it's only when they get to the likes of, because pre the COVID pandemic, I was in Pakistan 3 or 4 times a year. And I would go from university to university, make presentations and do presentations at the National Incubation Centre and any other business arena that would have me. And when I would say to young people in particular, come and have a chat, come on the stage and have a chat. It was almost like, these people are never going to come on the stage because they're frightened. And it's the fear of getting it wrong. But as you know me well enough now, I encourage people to have a go. And if they get it wrong, you say either and I say either. We can tomato and tomato and potato. I mean, although we've got the same language, we say things differently. And then they can have different meaning. But I find a lot of people, it's not that they can't speak it, it's they're afraid to speak it. And it's that fear. And it's the fear they've got to get over. And you only get over that fear one way. And face it, go and do it. Stand up in front of the mirror, and recite something and smile at the same time.
And some of them that are scared, they'll get to the mirror and it's like...
Yeah, absolutely. It's, what do I say? Well, say anything you like. Typically, I say, do you like music? Oh, yeah, I love music. I said, what's your favorite band or your favorite singer? And they'll tell me. And I say, okay, well, can you sing a few words? And they sing it perfectly. And then I say, okay, rather than sing the words, can you say them? And they've got to have the tune in their mind to get the words over. And I'm sure you've seen this as well, because you did special needs for many years, didn't you? Kids, young kids that stammer a lot. Let's not worry about the reason why they stammer, because typically it's not. It's nothing to do with a disease as such. This is a curable disease for most people. But there's been lots of experiments done over the years. They sound like guinea pigs now, but it's not quite that way. But there's lots of experimentation that's been done of how to get children over the stammer. And a lot of that was done in the first stages, because I was reading up on this quite recently. So 30 or 40 years ago, they introduced literature. So stanzas and limericks. There was a young man from Dunblane who went to get on a plane. And as you get that motion, that rhythm, and someone that's got a stammer that learns these words and gets into the rhythm, gets over the stammer. And music is another one. And as I said to you before, just now, people can sing the music, but when you ask them to speak the lyrics, they can't do it because they're having to think. So we do a lot with music about getting people confident in public speaking.
I wonder why people are so scared to speak. I mean, I say it sometimes, hey, we're on screen. I can't bite your head. I may have a loud voice and I may be pushy at times, but I can't physically come over and touch you and say, boy, you're dumb. And I won't say, boy, you're dumb, because you're really very courageous to come on stage and come on camera and speak. And I'm trying to figure out how to make it easier for them to feel comfortable coming up, to feel comfortable doing something new.
Well, here's one thing we do quite often in MindFit. So MindFit programs, we work with very senior management. And you would think that senior management have got all the tools in the box. And when I say senior management, they are, way up there. They've got their own office, they travel around the world on expense accounts, da-di-da-di-da. So these are very, very senior, highly respected people, and they're very good at their job. However, it doesn't mean they're good in public speaking, because you can't just turn it on. You need to practice. They may be very good communicators in small teams, but when you put them up in front of 5,000 people, I've seen them be like rabbits in headlights. They just freeze. So you need to get over that. And as I say, these are incredibly well-educated, high-performing individuals, and yet they have, in essence, exactly the same problem that the people you're talking to. And the way we get around it is quite simple. Get them to talk about something that interests them. So imagine this. We're in an office. There's the whole team together. Say there's 20 people there. And this person is the leader of that team, and they're not very good at public speaking. So we're all sat in a circle, and either myself or my colleague will start opening up and we'll start having a discussion. And then we'll turn around to one person and say, so what really interests you? And that person will literally just say, well, I like football, I like soccer. And we'll say, well, so what is it about soccer? And they'll explain what it is about soccer. But it's something that's of interest to them.
Right.
So, they may enjoy taking their children to a soccer match. They may like watching it on football, or watch it on TV with their mates. And all of this will come out. And this is not business language. This is about something that they're passionate about in their private life. And then this was a bit orchestrated, because we do a little bit of homework on everybody. And then we asked the manager, so what do you do? What do you like doing on weekends? And she was into, well, it's called heraldry over here, but it's using an eagle that flies around the sky and comes back onto your arm. And my colleague said, wow, falconry? And she said, yeah, it's falconry. And he said, that must be amazing. I mean, when these things are diving out of the air, don't you get frightened of them? And she said, no. You don't do that first off. You get a lot of practice. So by this time, everyone's now listening to her. And she's just talking about something that she really enjoyed, not work related, but she could ream it off time and time again about this and this competition she went into, and this person was the best in the world. And, the most difficult bird to understand was a particular type of eagle. And everyone was mesmerized about a topic that they'd never heard from their boss. And yet their boss did this every single weekend. Now, you can then translate that. Okay, this is something you enjoy. and you're talking about it. What you've got to do now is, in a business world, find out something you enjoy when you have to stand up in front of everybody and talk about that, the part you enjoy. And it may be you're giving the month-end results, and there's a graph in the background, etc., etc. But you enjoy your job, don't you? And she said, yeah. I said, well, there you go. All you got to do is convince everybody else.
And that's so very important. And along with this, can we add one other piece? Communication or a conversation has two parts. And people are ready to speak, and they want to speak. But listening is so very important. Can you mention your feelings on that? And how important listening is?
A lot of religious people will have been told this, whether they're Christian or Muslim or any other domination around the world, but you've got two ears and one mouth for a reason. I was told that when I was very young.
I think we all have been told that.
It didn't quite sit, but but the interesting thing is, you see, as a child, okay, so we need to look at our own evolution. As a child, we're curious, we explore. If we weren't curious and of an exploration type of arena, we would never have learned to walk, because you didn't go to school to learn to walk, didn't read a book, didn't watch a video. We just saw people around us. And you've heard me say this many times, that had commitment, a passion, a purpose, and we were totally focused on learning how to walk. And we fell over several times, and it might have hurt us. I know babies, that's not a common thing, but some babies fall over and break their arm when they're learning how to walk. So it can be, quite a perilous event, just learning how to walk. But when we then learn how to talk, the last thing a child does is shut up. Why this? Why that? What's happening over there? What time's dinner? Do I have to go to bed now? Oh, can't I play this game a little bit longer? And as you can hear what I'm saying, they're all questions, and they're all challenges in questions. So, and what we want is, we want the answer that fits what we want. What's in it for me? We learn, the WIFM arena, we learn that at a very, very early age. And it's tough being a parent, because you don't go on a parenting course and find out exactly how to bring your kids up properly. But you have to relate to each child. So you've heard of another phrase, children should be seen but not heard.
Yeah.
That's in one of the parenting books, even today, and don't speak until you're spoken to. Another very Western approach, very polite English approach to saying, shut up. But we don't know how to listen, Carla. I mean, that's the problem. We're not taught how to listen. You're a teacher, okay? You taught for many years. If a child was being a little bit raucous in the classroom, what would you typically say to that child?
I hate to admit, sit down and close the mouth.
Exactly. You can say it in a nasty way or polite way or a very abrupt way. And if you had a bad day, you'd probably shout it. I can remember at school getting the blackboard rubber thrown at me, and it's not one of these cloth erasers. It's a bit of wood.
Yeah.
and that used to be thrown at me, and I can remember getting. And if you duck, you're told to pick it up and take it to the front of the class, and you get caned. So you may as well let it hit, because I mean, fortunately, that doesn't happen. Well, it happens in some schools, but not. But it's corporal punishment, as they call it. But that was a message from the teacher. You know, Gaunt, shut up, listen. So there's many ways we can tell people to shut up and listen, but we don't explain to them how to do that. And it's only when you work out how to do it for yourself that it will work. Well, there are thousands of ways you can do it. But here's one, right? And a lot of people today, just in the cold light of day, would think I'm mad. But when I was revising for my finals when I was 21, there was lots of noise, in the university. It's a very active university. I would have my headphones on and I would have Dire Straits or Genesis played at the top of volume. But the interesting thing is, I wasn't listening to it.
Yeah.
It was blocking things out so that I could focus on what I was reading. Forget the video lark and the interactive stuff that students have these days. I had a book and I had my notebook, and in my notebook I had scribble all over the place. I might have doodled, to make myself remember. You know what it was like,
Yeah.
But I had headphones on, and mostly it was Genesis, and it was beaming out in my ears. How I'm not hearing impaired now is anyone's guess, but I used it as a blocker so that I could focus on what I was doing. But we're not taught how to listen. And what's worse is, because we're not taught how to listen, people listen to respond. They don't listen to think. So going back to what you said about communication, you can only have a good communication two-way street if you're listening to the other person's talk.
And that's the thing I don't think any of us do very well.
No, we're very bad listeners.
Yeah, I think I'm improving, but I'm nowhere where I would like to be when it comes to listening.
And the interesting thing is, it is so easy, but you've got to do it. You need to practice it. As I said, I had headphones on with incredibly loud music, and I can listen over the music. I can think over the music. That was just the way I did it. And funnily enough, lots of my friends at university did something very, very similar. Others went to the library, which was like, shh, we had a big library in the university, and it was like, when you walk in there's only the coffee area, which happened to be in the basement, that you were allowed to speak, and everywhere else you weren't allowed to speak. And some people have to have that silence to be able to listen to what they're doing. But we just need to practice listening.
And even though you're saying we just need to practice listening, that word listening goes beyond anything anyone's saying.
Because absolutely.
You need to learn to say, not that I'm listening and I want to respond, but I'm listening to hear what you're saying. And many times people don't listen to hear what you're saying. They listen only to respond. And that's a totally different type of listening.
And you get that a lot, actually, when people go on development courses. It could be the best trainer in the world in front of you, but you will hear something that you agree with, and your brain will be smiling away inside, and you won't listen to what's next.
Right.
You'll have blocked it out. And as I say to many people, they say, well, how did you get involved in MindFit? And I said, well, it was complete, coincidence. And coincidence, a good friend of mine said many years ago, he said, coincidence, Neville, is God's way of staying anonymous. We call it serendipity over here. I'm sure you've heard of that as well. But things happen, and they happen for a reason. And I just happened to be deputizing for a good friend of mine who had bought a seat to listen to someone speak. And he said, just go sit on the seat, It doesn't matter what he's saying, just sit on the seat. I want to make sure that people can't look around because they will know that seat was mine. So I've actually got someone to have a bum on a seat. And I sat there and I don't know what I was expecting, but a guy called Graham Williams started to speak and he spoke very quietly, which is interesting because 10 years earlier, he had been an area commander in the police force. And one thing area commanders are is not very quiet. But he was incredibly quietly spoken. And what I found was I was having to shut my brain down into thinking on what he was saying, because if I was thinking about what he'd just said, I'd have blocked off what he was about to say.
Right.
So it was almost like there were so many light bulbs coming on and so many reference points that he was picking up in my world that I really wanted to listen to what else he was saying. And that's the art of a really good communicator. So not only are they saying wonderful things, but they're relating to your world. But at the same time, I actually learned a skill that I didn't know that I had. So for instance, here you go. Do you ever watch a comedian on the TV?
Oh, yeah.
Do you ever go to a theatre with your friends and there's a comedian?
That I haven't done, but I have always wanted to.
But you've been at home watching a comedian with your friends maybe.
Yeah.
And the comedian says something and you're all laughing. You might be doubled up in laughter because that comedian has spoken about something that has touched you somewhere in your life. But the reality is it touched you differently to your best friend. Because the likelihood is when what you're laughing about is a completely different thing that your friend's laughing about.
And that brings up another point, which we'll talk about in the conference more, is that no two people, no matter how close you are, think alike. And sometimes you need to ask questions to make sure that you understand what the person is actually saying.
And that actually is one of the biggest problems of communication. And it's the biggest problem for a business that hasn't really got their message over properly. I call it the difference between a brand and your branding. A brand is what people see. Your branding is what you're telling them. And there could be a huge chasm between the two. They'll be close enough to sort of get it, in which case you'll buy from them. But if they are so far apart, you won't buy from them. And so when you say about going back to this listening bit, if someone is trying to get the message over as they try to put it over and you don't understand it, don't move on and say, yeah, I get that. Say, actually, I don't get that. Let me tell you what I've just heard. And they may say, actually, that's right. You said it better than I did. In which case, happy days. You're both happy. But if it's completely different from the message that the person was saying, at least you've had the courage to say, I didn't understand. And I'll go back to school now, okay? When the teacher said, have you all got that? 30 kids in front, done something quite complicated. And no one's prepared to say, sorry, miss, sorry, sir, I didn't quite understand that. And yet the majority of the kids probably didn't understand it. And they're hoping that the best person in the class would explain it to them during the break.
Very interesting comment in the comments. Someone just said, I've been following you for a long time. The person has never been to my show. And he said, I can't get a good job because I can't speak English. Well, first of all, you can't speak English because you haven't practiced. You can speak English if you could write this so beautifully in the chat.
Exactly. Yeah. You're pretty good at English because you've written it,
Right. So I know you can speak English because I also know that when you learned to speak Urdu, you weren't reading and writing first. You heard Urdu.
Exactly.
You responded to your parents in Urdu.
Yep.
For many years until you learned to speak before you learned not to speak, but to read and write in English, in Urdu. Speaking comes first. The fact that you can speak in that language, in English, tells me you'll learn to read. But in your case, the fact that you can read and write in English tells me you can speak it.
Yeah, it's a fascinating world, isn't it? And there's no one answer to this, really. But the solution is always the same. Practice, practice, and more practice. Just like you learn to do anything. You learn to read English, write English. You don't just do it like that. You actually practice, practice, and practice. But the issue is, are you practicing the right thing? So you and I mentioned golf in the past, okay? And I know I know your parents were golfers for a while. Now, when you play golf, right, and you really want to hit the ball straight down the fairway. You don't want to hit it to the left, which they call a hook, or to the right, which a right-hander would call a slice. You really, really, really want to hit the ball straight ahead where you've decided to put it. But sometimes you do hit the ball in the wrong place. It might even only travel 10 yards. But it might travel, you may have hit the ball perfectly, but you hit it so far out to the right, it's gone out of bounds or in the water. You didn't intend to do that, but the practice that you'd done actually made that happen. So what we've got to do is we've got to do the right practice next time to say, how do I hit the ball straighter down the fairway every time? And the point is, you have to practice, practice, and practice, but you have to practice in a particular way. And part of the practice we tell people to do is deliberately hit it out of bounds to the left or the right, deliberately. Because if you can do it deliberately, you can stop doing it deliberately. Right. So you may have heard, when we go through life, we learn a lot. But we don't talk about unlearning. And we should. Because if we've got into a bad habit, we need to unlearn that bad habit and practice good habits. And it is as simple as that, really. But it's got to be practice, practice, and practice. And
in learning to communicate in English, it means you go to situations where you are speaking in English. And that's why my show exists.
Exactly.
That's why I have classes, private classes teaching English.
Yep.
But people are afraid I'm going to make a mistake.
Good. I'm pleased you're going to make a mistake because the good thing is you've tried. But now you know, having tried and you've been told, actually, you need to say it this way. You're just improving, just like that golfer that has hit the ball off to the left. If they understand how the ball goes to the left, then they can actually make adjustments to put it down the middle of the fairway.
People are saying that you're a good speaker, just so you know. But the important thing, and I think people don't realize, no one is perfect.
No,
Everyone makes mistakes every day, all day long. I don't care if it's Neville Gaunt, me, Rehan, Allahwala, whoever it is, we all make mistakes. And by mistakes, we grow. By mistakes, we become a better person. So instead of saying, oh no, I made a mistake, and I do that too at times, I'm not perfect with it. Say, by gosh, I made a mistake and I learned something new. Mistakes are the steps to to learning. What do you think, my friend?
A mistake is just feedback. Right. And this is another thing that we're not very good at either giving or receiving. So again, we can look at a parent and a child. If a child has done something really bad, what does the parents? You stupid idiot, you shouldn't have done. Is that any use? I mean, the child already knows they've done something stupid. So the issue is we don't know how to give feedback. And the problem with that is the majority of the feedback we need to be giving to ourselves. And if we're not good at giving feedback, just like we're not good at listening, I'm not saying we're not good at thinking, but a lot of people are not good at thinking either. So you need to improve how you give feedback.
Right.
I always say, I don't know if you know much about driving around Pakistan, but they have, but unlike America, where you have 6-lane highways and you only have 6 lanes of cars, in Pakistan, you have 6-lane highways and 12 lanes of cars. And probably several lanes of motorbikes. So there's no real control in it, and it's just accepted. It's a habit. Everyone does it. And the way you pass your feedback to other people on the road is very similar to the way I would pass my feedback to people on the road in the UK. I get on the horn. And at certain times of the day, I used to travel along the Islamabad highway, main highway into central Islamabad. You could hear music being played by all of these horns, because it wouldn't be very nice music because there's no conductor, but everyone would be beep 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 beep, and another one be beep, and I think actually we could convince Rehan to get a conductor to put all this to music and just make people
on the billboard.
Exactly. Yeah, I better not put it on the billboard, otherwise that'll just be another distraction and there'll be more accidents. So we don't want to do that. But as I say, people.
Sorry, I can't help
it. But say people just don't know how to give feedback, or accept feedback. So if you don't do something to the best that you can do, and you haven't done it, rather than saying to yourself, well, that was pretty rubbish, wasn't it? And then the self-talk can really turn you in its extremes. It can turn you to drink, you know. Oh, I should never have done that in the first place. You know, I knew I was going to get it wrong, you know, and it's this self-talk and this feedback that we've just got to stop. Whereas if we turn around and say, didn't quite go as well, you know, what could I have done better?
Let me stop you for a moment, because someone just wrote, are you making fun of our country? And no, we're not.
No, absolutely not. You know, I can take you around Hyde Park Corner and people are still beeping their horns, you know, telling people to get out of the way. What I'm talking about is feedback, and people give feedback all the time. I'm certainly not making fun of your country. You know, either we're saying it in the wrong way, or we should, you know, tone up what we're saying, but certainly not making fun of the country.
No, not at all. And in the United States, the same thing happens.
Oh, exactly.
It happens all throughout the world. As Neville was speaking, I had some thoughts, and I just saw people even traveling down 16th Street, where I live, to the White House, and you'll hear beeping all the time. And
you will do. You will do. In fact, in the 1970s movie, The Italian Job, there's a traffic jam in Milan, and it was all orchestrated so that people could steal the gold bullion. But you would see people that were in the traffic jam, they get out of their cars, stand, you know, literally sit in the roof arena. They'd open their roof rack and they'd sit in the roof arena, and they'd put their foot on the horn and be smoking a cigarette. So you can actually go and watch that film, and everyone will be because they're all stuck in traffic jam and they just want to make a noise. They want to let everyone know they're there.
Yeah.
But it's just feedback. We're just talking about feedback here. And the point is, people are not very good at giving feedback. And if they're not good at giving feedback, they can't give good feedback to themselves. The self-talk will turn them down, and that will stop them doing anything. And
self-talk happens for everyone. There is
everybody.
No one in the world who I think is constantly giving positive feedback to themselves. And that is another thing when you're communicating. It's learning what you're saying to yourself also goes out to the people around us. And it's okay to be whoever you are at any point, because the difference between you and someone else is what makes the world so beautiful. Every rose is a little different, but that makes the roses extremely beautiful.
Absolutely. One man's meat is another man's poison, as the saying goes. Right. And as you well know, there are lots of sayings that we say a lot, but people really don't understand them because they've not really investigated them. So people listen to respond. They don't listen to think. Unless you unravel that, you really have no idea what it means. You just go, oh yeah, you're right. I need to think more.
And that's what's needed in the world.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And it's needed between even the best of friends. And what makes people enemies is that we don't listen to learn, we listen to respond.
Yep.
So wars happen because of that.
Absolutely. Well, Carla, we've had well over an hour here, and it's nice to know that people are still listening and thinking, which is beautiful.
However, you want to eat dinner.
I need to have my dinner. Yeah.
I want to thank you.
No, my pleasure.
Could you just leave the audience with one or two great tips for them to think about?
I can give some insights into a couple of things, but one thing in particular, okay? We spoke about practice, and more practice. And there's a well-known saying out there, practice makes perfect. But that's not true, because practice makes permanent. So for instance, if you like playing the piano, but you're not disciplined enough to play all the notes in the right place, okay, it's going to sound a little bit rough, okay? But you've been practicing those notes all the time. And to you, it might sound okay, but it's not what the notes on the notebook, on the songbook is saying. So any practice makes permanent, but it's only the right practice that makes perfect. And the big issue is, how do you know you're practicing the right thing? You need to get feedback from somewhere to prove to you that what you're doing is the right practice. And if it's not the right practice, don't worry about it, because you've learned something huge. And all you've got to do is change the practice slightly, because a small change makes a big impact. Don't think about wholesale change, just to do a small change.
Someone just wrote, and I wasn't going to mention it, but I want to. Correct practice makes a man perfect. In my mind, there's no such thing as perfection.
No. Yeah, well, it's true. But if we're going to have something to aim towards, then it's correct practice. But the question I've got for the person that put that there, how do you know it's correct? And when you know it's correct, you can make it part of your process. But if that process doesn't work, then it wasn't as correct as you thought it was. So now you need to make a small change. And it's as simple as that, really.
I think that was a great ending to this. And I am really happy to say that Neville will be appearing on the conference on the English literacy, the Global English Literacy Conference on November 7th from 8 to 10 p.m. Pakistan time and 11 to 1 p.m. 11 a.m. to 1 p.m.
You'll get there, Carla. And the UK is somewhere in the middle.
Well, it's for you, it would be 4 to 5.
4 to 6. Yeah.
Thank you, Neville.
No, it's been my pleasure.
So
nice to have a chat.
Very much. And I want to thank the Institute of Peace for sponsoring this. And Neville, can we wave goodbye? Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for listening. Got any questions? Ask us.